Story 1. The Midnight Census Taker. Marcus Webb had been a long-haul trucker for 17 years, running routes that crisscrossed Pennsylvania like veins through flesh. He'd driven through every backwater town the state had to offer, from the coal-stripped mountains of the Northeast to the forgotten farming communities that dotted the western valleys. In all those years, he thought he'd seen everything these rural roads could throw at him. The night of October 14, 2019 taught him otherwise. The call came through around 9 p.m. His dispatcher needed someone to pick up an emergency freight delivery from a small manufacturing plant outside a town called Millerton, population 847, nestled in the forests of central Pennsylvania. The plant produced specialized industrial components, and a factory in Ohio needed the parts by morning to avoid shutting down their production line. Marcus was only 40 miles away, finishing a delivery in State College. The pay was double his usual rate for the inconvenience. He took the job without hesitation. He pulled his Kenworth onto Route 144 just after 10 o'clock, the October darkness absolute beyond his headlights. The GPS showed Millerton as a small cluster of buildings 12 miles ahead, accessible by a county road that split off from the main highway. Marcus had never heard of the place, but that meant nothing. Pennsylvania had hundreds of these dying little towns, their populations aging out, their young people fleeing to cities, their main streets slowly surrendering to entropy. The turn onto County Road 617 came up suddenly, marked by a weather-beaten sign that read, Millerton, 3 miles. The road narrowed immediately, twisting through dense forest that pressed close on both sides. His headlights swept across tree trunks thick with age, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out even the starlight. The pavement was cracked and poorly maintained, forcing Marcus to slow to 30 miles per hour. 2 miles in, he passed the first house. A small ranch-style building sat back from the road, completely dark except for a single porch light that cast a weak yellow glow. Marcus noticed a car in the driveway, a sedan from the early 2000s covered in a thick layer of dust. The house looked occupied but lifeless, like someone had simply stopped caring about it years ago. A quarter-mile further, he passed another dark house, this one a 2-story farmhouse with peeling paint and a sagging roof. Again a vehicle in the driveway. Again that sense of abandonment despite signs of habitation. Millerton proper appeared around the next bend. The town consisted of a single main street lined with old brick buildings, most of their storefronts dark or boarded up. A gas station with ancient pumps stood on one corner, its price sign showing numbers that hadn't changed in what looked like months. A small diner next to it had lights on inside, but Marcus couldn't see any movement through the windows. The downtown area was completely deserted, not a single car parked along the street, no pedestrians, no signs of life beyond those few burning lights. The manufacturing plant sat at the far end of town, a low-slung metal building with a small parking lot. 3 cars occupied spaces near the entrance, and the loading dock lights were on. Marcus pulled into the lot, set his air brakes, and climbed down from the cab. The night air was cold and still, carrying a smell of pine and something else he couldn't quite identify. Something slightly sweet and unpleasant, like fruit left too long in the sun. He'd barely started walking toward the entrance when a man emerged from the building. Mid-50s, wearing work clothes and a tired expression, he waved Marcus toward the loading dock. "You're the emergency pickup?" the man called out. "That's me, Marcus Webb." The man nodded, already turning back toward the dock. "Got your pallets ready. Let's get you loaded and out of here." The loading process took 20 minutes. The plant worker operated the forklift in silence, loading 4 pallets of boxed components into Marcus's trailer. Another worker, a younger man who never made eye contact, helped secure the load. Neither man spoke beyond the bare minimum necessary for the job. Marcus tried making conversation twice and received only grunts in response. The atmosphere felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. These men moved with the mechanical efficiency of people going through motions they'd performed 10,000 times, but with none of the casual familiarity that usually developed in such situations. As Marcus signed the shipping documents, the older worker finally spoke beyond monosyllables. "You're heading back to 144? Yeah, then south toward Pittsburgh. Go back the way you came. Don't cut through town to the other county road." Marcus looked up from the paperwork. "My GPS is showing a shorter route going east through town." The man's expression didn't change. "Road's been bad. Washout damaged the bridge. You need to go back to 144. Something in the man's tone made Marcus's instincts prickle, but he nodded. "All right, back to 144. He climbed into his cab and started the engine, watching the plant workers disappear back into the building. The loading dock lights went out seconds after the door closed behind them, plunging the area into darkness except for his truck's lights. Marcus shook off the uneasy feeling, telling himself he was just tired. He'd driven through hundreds of dying factory towns. They were all depressing in their own ways. He pulled out of the parking lot and turned back toward the main street. The diner's lights were now off, he noticed. Had it even been 15 minutes since he'd first driven past? The whole downtown area was completely dark now, a corridor of dead buildings and empty sidewalks. His headlights swept across a stop sign at the main intersection, and he slowed to make the turn back toward County Road 617. That's when he saw the woman standing in the middle of the street. She stood directly in his path, 50 feet ahead, illuminated by his headlights. She wore a long, dark coat and held something in her hands. A clipboard, Marcus realized. She didn't move as his truck approached, didn't show any sign of fear or awareness that 18 tons of truck and cargo were bearing down on her. Marcus hit the brakes, the air system hissing as the truck shuddered to a stop 20 feet from where she stood. He waited for her to move. She didn't. She just stood there, looking down at her clipboard, her face pale in the harsh light. He leaned on the horn. The blast echoed through the empty street, but the woman didn't flinch, didn't look up, just kept staring at her clipboard as if she were completely alone. Marcus rolled down his window. "Ma'am, you need to move." No response. She turned slightly, still looking down, and began walking toward the driver's side of his truck. Her movements were strange, too smooth, like she was gliding rather than walking. As she got closer, Marcus could see her more clearly. She was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a white blouse under the dark coat, and the clipboard in her hands held papers that looked official. She stopped beside his door, finally looking up at him. Her face was completely expressionless, her eyes flat and unreflective in the light. "Good evening. I'm conducting the census for Millerton. Do you have a few minutes to answer some questions?" Marcus stared at her. "The census? At midnight?" "Yes. Do you have a few minutes?" "Lady, it's the middle of the night, and I don't live here. I'm just passing through." Her expression didn't change. "Are you currently residing in Millerton?" "No, I just said I'm passing through." "Are you currently residing in Millerton?" she repeated, her voice exactly the same tone and inflection as before. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Something was very wrong with this woman. "No, I need to go." "Are you currently residing in Millerton?" He rolled up his window and put the truck in gear. The woman stood there, staring up at him with those flat, dead eyes, still holding her clipboard. Marcus pulled around her, giving her a wide berth, and accelerated back toward County Road 617. In his side mirror, he saw her standing in the middle of the street, watching his truck leave. Not moving, just watching. The forest closed in again as he left the town behind. Marcus's hands were shaking slightly on the wheel. He'd encountered strange people on the road before, drunk or high or just mentally ill. But something about that woman had triggered every danger instinct he possessed. The way she'd moved, the way her face had been completely blank, the exact repetition of that question. He was a mile from town when he saw another figure standing beside the road ahead. A man this time, also holding a clipboard, standing in the grass at the road's edge. As Marcus's headlights hit him, the man raised his hand in a gesture for Marcus to stop. Marcus kept driving, accelerating. The man's arm stayed raised, his body motionless as the truck passed him. Half a mile further, another figure. A woman different from the first, standing in the middle of the road just like the census taker in town. Marcus swerved around her, his trailer swaying. She didn't move, didn't react to the truck missing her by inches. The next bend revealed 3 more figures, spread across the road in a line, all holding clipboards. Marcus laid on the horn and accelerated, threading between 2 of them. Their faces were visible for just a second in his headlights. All the same, expressionless, eyes flat and dead. They were appearing faster now. Every few hundred feet, another figure would emerge from the darkness. Some stood on the roadside, others in the middle of the pavement, all with clipboards, all with that same blank expression. Marcus's speedometer crept up to 50, dangerous on the narrow, winding road, but he couldn't bring himself to slow down. His heart hammered in his chest. The rational part of his mind screamed that this couldn't be real, that he was hallucinating, that something was wrong with him. But the figures kept appearing, kept standing in his path, kept watching him pass with those dead eyes. A man stepped directly in front of his truck with no warning. Marcus didn't have time to brake. He felt no impact, heard no sound, but in his mirror he saw the figure still standing in the road behind him, unharmed, turning to watch him go. The figures were everywhere now, lining both sides of the road, standing in groups, emerging from the forest, all holding clipboards, all wearing variations of business casual clothing, all moving with that same too smooth glide, and they were all converging on the road, moving toward his truck as he passed. Marcus saw the turn onto Route 144 ahead and nearly sobbed with relief. He took the turn too fast, his trailer skidding, and roared onto the main highway. The road was empty and well lit by comparison. He pushed the truck to 70, then 80, desperate to put distance between himself and that nightmare road. 5 miles down the highway, his CB radio crackled to life. Static, then a voice. Female. Flat and emotionless. "Are you currently residing in Millerton?" Marcus grabbed the CB and turned it off. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the knob. He drove for another hour before pulling into a rest stop, his entire body trembling with adrenaline. He sat in his cab with the doors locked, all the lights on until the sun came up. He delivered his load to the Ohio factory, then drove straight home to his apartment outside Harrisburg. He told his dispatcher he was taking a week off. He needed it to steady his nerves, to convince himself he'd experienced some kind of breakdown brought on by stress and lack of sleep. But 3 days later, he received a letter at his home address. No return address, no postmark. Inside was a single sheet of paper with questions printed in neat rows. Census questions. At the top, written in pen, "You did not complete your census form. Please return this immediately." At the bottom of the page, written in the same pen, "Current residence, Millerton, PA." Marcus burned the letter. He changed his route requests at work, making sure he'd never drive through central Pennsylvania again. He sold his apartment and moved to Delaware. He changed his cell phone number. None of it helped. The letters kept coming. Different addresses, always finding him. Always the same message. Always insisting he was a resident of Millerton. Always demanding he complete the census form. And sometimes, late at night, when he's pulled over at a rest stop or parked in a truck yard, he sees them standing at the edge of the light, figures with clipboards, watching, waiting. Their blank faces patient and eternal. Marcus knows that eventually he'll have to go back. They won't stop until he does. until he admits that he's a resident of Millerton, until he becomes one of the figures standing in the dark, holding a clipboard, asking the question over and over. Are you currently residing in Millerton? Story 2. The Loop at Barker's Crossing. Jennifer Chen had been driving Uber and Lyft for 3 years, working the late-night shifts around the smaller towns outside Philadelphia, where demand was low, but tips were generous. She preferred the quiet rides, the empty roads, the solitude of night driving. At 32, she'd carved out a comfortable niche servicing the bar closings and late shift changes in places like Phoenixville, Pottstown, and the scattered rural communities between them. The night of March 7, 2021, she picked up a fare that would make her question the very nature of reality. The request came through her Uber app at 11:47 p.m. Pickup at Barker's Crossing, a tiny unincorporated community about 15 miles northwest of Pottstown. The destination was Reading, 30 miles away. Good fare, probably $70 with the late-night surge pricing. Jennifer accepted it and plugged the pickup address into her GPS. Barker's Crossing was barely a town, just a handful of houses clustered around the intersection of 2 county roads. She'd never picked up anyone from there before. The GPS showed a 20-minute drive down progressively smaller roads. Jennifer turned up her podcast and settled in for the drive, her Honda Accord gliding through the darkness. The roads narrowed as she drove, going from 4 lanes to 2 lanes to barely 1.5 lanes. The pavement cracked and buckled from years of freeze-thaw cycles. Houses became sparser, separated by acres of dark farmland. She passed a shuttered gas station, then a small church with a cemetery that pressed right up against the road, old headstones tilted at odd angles. Her GPS announced she was 2 miles from the pickup point. The road curved through a stretch of dense woods, then emerged into a small clearing where 4 or 5 houses sat in darkness. A single streetlight illuminated the intersection ahead, its sodium glow creating a circle of yellow-orange light. This was Barker's Crossing. A figure stood beneath the streetlight, a woman probably in her 60s wearing a heavy winter coat despite the mild March weather. She held a small suitcase and was looking down at her phone. Jennifer pulled up beside her and rolled down the passenger window. "Uber for Margaret?" The woman looked up and smiled. "Yes, that's me. Thank you for coming all the way out here." Her voice was warm and grandmotherly. She opened the back door and settled in with her suitcase beside her. Jennifer checked her app to confirm the destination. Reading, Pennsylvania. Drop-off at an address on Penn Street downtown. "Heading to Reading tonight?" "Yes, dear, my daughter lives there. I'm staying with her for a few weeks." Margaret buckled her seatbelt. "I hope the drive isn't too much trouble." "Not at all. It's a nice drive." Jennifer pulled away from the intersection, following her GPS's directions back the way she'd come. According to the route, she'd take the same county road back for 5 miles, then turn onto Route 100 south toward Reading. They drove in comfortable silence for the first few minutes. Margaret seemed content to look out the window at the darkness, and Jennifer focused on the winding road. The podcast played softly from her speakers, a true crime story about disappearances in national parks. The GPS showed 4 miles to the turn onto Route 100. Jennifer glanced in her rearview mirror and saw Margaret's face reflected in the glow of passing road signs. The older woman seemed peaceful, almost serene. 3 miles to the turn. The road curved through the woods again, and Jennifer noticed they were approaching that small church with the cemetery she'd passed earlier. She recognized the way the headstones caught her headlights. 2 miles to the turn. They passed the shuttered gas station. Jennifer frowned slightly. Something felt off, but she couldn't place what. The GPS showed they were on the correct route. 1 mile to the turn. The houses started appearing again, becoming more frequent. Jennifer's frown deepened. These were the same houses she'd seen on the way to the pickup, the same shuttered windows, the same cars in the driveways. Recalculating route, her GPS announced suddenly. In .2 miles, turn right onto County Road 23. Jennifer's stomach tightened. That was the turn she'd taken to get to Barker's Crossing in the first place. She glanced at her phone mounted on the dashboard. The blue line showed her route continuing straight, but the GPS voice insisted she turn right. She kept driving straight. The GPS recalculated again, then announced the same turn. Jennifer ignored it, her unease growing. Something was wrong. She was definitely passing the same landmarks she'd seen on the way in. The road curved one more time and the streetlight appeared ahead. The intersection, Barker's Crossing, the exact spot where she'd picked up Margaret. Jennifer's heart started racing. She looked down at her GPS. It showed she'd been driving for 7 minutes, covering 6 miles, but she was back at the starting point. That was impossible. "Is something wrong, dear?" Margaret's voice came from the back seat, still warm and grandmotherly. I think I missed a turn." Jennifer tried to keep her voice steady. "Let me check the GPS." She pulled over beside the streetlight. The intersection was exactly as it had been when she'd arrived. Same houses in darkness, same single light. She checked her app again. Pickup location, Barker's Crossing. Destination, reading. Route clearly marked. But according to her car's odometer and the GPS's distance tracking, she'd driven the right distance. She should be 6 miles away, approaching Route 100. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, looking back at Margaret. "I think there's something wrong with my GPS. We somehow ended up back where we started." Margaret smiled. "That happens sometimes on these old roads. Why don't you try again?" Jennifer nodded, trying to suppress her growing panic. She pulled back onto the road and started driving again, this time paying careful attention to every turn and landmark. She didn't make any turns. The road was a straight shot back toward Route 100 with only gentle curves. She couldn't possibly get lost. But 7 minutes later, the streetlight appeared ahead again. The same intersection, the same houses, Barker's Crossing. "No," Jennifer whispered. "No, this isn't possible." "Is everything all right?" Margaret asked, her tone unchanged. Pleasant, unconcerned. Jennifer pulled over again, her hands shaking on the wheel. She checked her phone. 7 more minutes had passed, another 6 miles on the odometer. But she was back at the starting point again. She opened Google Maps, then Apple Maps. Both showed the same route. Both insisted she was at Barker's Crossing and that Reading was 30 miles away on a simple, direct route. "This doesn't make sense," Jennifer said, more to herself than to Margaret. "We're driving in a circle, but the road is straight." "These old roads can be tricky," Margaret said. "Especially at night." Jennifer turned to look at her passenger. Margaret sat in the same position as before, hands folded on her lap, that pleasant smile on her face. In the glow of the streetlight, Jennifer could see her more clearly. The older woman's eyes were strange, too bright, too steady, unblinking. "How many times have you taken this drive?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, many times. I visit my daughter very often." "And how many times have you gone in circles?" Margaret's smile didn't falter. "Every time, dear." Jennifer's blood went cold. She grabbed her phone and tried calling 911. No signal. She tried opening her internet browser. No connection. But her GPS still worked, still showed the route, still indicated she had cellular service. She tried texting her roommate. The message failed to send. "You should try driving again," Margaret suggested. "Maybe this time will be different." "No." Jennifer shook her head. "No, I'm going to turn around. I'm going back the other direction." "There is no other direction." Jennifer ignored her and put the car in gear. She did a U-turn at the intersection and started driving the opposite way, back toward where she'd originally come from. The road stretched ahead into darkness. She accelerated to 50, then 60, pushing her Accord faster than was safe on the narrow road. 5 miles by the odometer. She passed a house she didn't recognize, then another. Her hope surged. These weren't the same houses. She was going somewhere different. 6 miles. A church appeared ahead. Jennifer's hope died. The same church, the same cemetery, the same tilted headstones. 7 miles. The streetlight appeared. The intersection. Barker's Crossing. She was back again. Jennifer's breath came in short gasps. She pulled over and gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles were white. This couldn't be happening. Roads didn't loop back on themselves like this. Space didn't work this way. She was experiencing some kind of breakdown, or she'd been drugged, or she was dreaming. "It's not a dream," Margaret said from the back seat, "and you're not crazy. The crossing just works this way." Jennifer turned to face her. "What are you?" "I'm Margaret. I'm visiting my daughter in Reading." "Bullshit. Tell me what's happening." Margaret's expression changed for the first time. The smile faded, and something ancient and tired replaced it. "The crossing doesn't let go. It hasn't for a very long time. The roads just loop. They always have. You can drive for hours, days, weeks. You'll just keep coming back here. That's impossible. And yet here you are." Jennifer tried her phone again. Still no signal for calls, but the GPS still worked. She tried canceling the ride in her Uber app. The button didn't respond. She tried logging out. The app wouldn't close. "How long have you been here?" Jennifer asked. "I'm not sure anymore. Time gets strange in the loop. I've seen the seasons change. I've seen my suitcase wear out and renew itself. I've watched drivers try to escape. Some give up after a few hours. Some try for days." Margaret looked out the window at the streetlight. "None of them ever leave. There has to be a way out. If there is, I haven't found it. Neither has anyone else." Jennifer started driving again. She tried different speeds. She tried pulling over and walking down the road. She tried driving with her eyes closed. She tried following side roads that branched off from the main route. Every attempt ended the same way. 7 minutes, 6 miles. Back to the intersection. Hours passed. The night should have been ending, but the darkness never lightened. Jennifer's phone showed 11:54 p.m. It had shown 11:54 p.m. for what felt like hours. Margaret sat in the back seat, unchanging, occasionally offering gentle comments that were more unsettling than helpful. Jennifer tried reasoning it out. If the space was looped, there had to be a seam somewhere, a point where the loop connected to itself. She drove slowly, looking for anomalies, anything that seemed out of place. She found nothing. The road was consistent, the landmarks in the same positions, the distance measurements correct. She tried driving backwards. She tried getting on the roof of her car to see if the perspective changed anything. She tried digging at the pavement with a tire iron from her trunk. Some irrational part of her brain convinced the road itself was the trap. Nothing worked. At some point, she noticed another car approaching from behind, headlights growing in her mirror. Hope surged in her chest. Another driver. Someone who could help or at least confirm she wasn't insane. But as the vehicle got closer, she recognized it. A Honda Accord, blue. Same model as hers, same license plate. She was seeing herself. Another version of herself in another loop, driving the same route, trapped in the same cycle. The car passed her on a straight section of road. Jennifer caught a glimpse of the driver, herself, looking terrified. In the back seat, she could see Margaret smiling pleasantly. "How many of me are in here?" Jennifer asked, her voice hollow. "I'm not sure," Margaret said. "Sometimes I see multiples, sometimes just one." The loop layers itself. Time becomes non-linear here. Jennifer pulled over and turned off the car. She sat in the darkness, the street light 50 yards ahead, her phone showing 11:54 p.m., and tried to accept what was happening to her. She was trapped. The loop wouldn't let her go. She could drive forever and never escape. "What happens if I just stop?" she asked. "If I refuse to drive?" "Then you sit here," Margaret said. "The loop continues whether you drive or not. You'll sit at this intersection watching yourself drive by over and over. Eventually you'll drive again. Everyone does. Sitting still becomes unbearable." Jennifer started the car. She drove the loop again, and again, and again, each time hoping for something to change, each time ending back at Barker's Crossing. Somewhere around what might have been the 100th loop, she noticed something new. A figure standing beside the streetlight. A man in an Uber driver vest, slumped against the pole, staring at nothing. Jennifer stopped beside him. "How long have you been here?" she called out her window. The man looked at her with dead eyes. "I don't remember anymore. I had a pickup at Barker's Crossing that was... I don't know. Months ago, years, the loop just keeps going. There has to be a way out." The man laughed, a sound without humor. "You'll think that for a while, then you'll stop thinking it, then you'll just drive." Jennifer accelerated away from him, refusing to accept his resignation. But loop after loop, hour after hour, she felt her hope eroding. The road never changed. The time never changed. Margaret never changed. The loop was eternal. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Jennifer knew she was becoming part of it. Becoming another ghost of Barker's Crossing. Another driver trapped in an impossible circle, doomed to repeat the same 7 minutes, the same 6 miles, the same return to that street light forever. Her phone still shows 11:54 p.m. The GPS still shows the route to Reading. Margaret still sits in the back seat, patient and unchanging. And Jennifer drives. She always drives. Because sitting still is worse than moving, even when movement leads nowhere. The loop never ends. It never even begins. It just is. And Jennifer Chen is part of it now. Another layer in an infinite recursion. Another ghost on a road that leads everywhere and nowhere, trapped in the 7 minutes and 6 miles of Barker's Crossing. Story 3. The Breathing Building. Thomas Callahan had worked in commercial HVAC maintenance for 22 years, servicing heating and cooling systems in everything from shopping malls to hospitals. He'd crawled through thousands of mechanical rooms and ceiling spaces, dealt with every conceivable problem a climate control system could develop, and prided himself on his ability to diagnose issues others couldn't solve. The job at Riverside Industrial Park in Harmonsburg, Pennsylvania seemed routine when he received the work order on January 19, 2023. By the time he left 2 days later, he'd filed for early retirement and refused to ever work on commercial HVAC systems again. The work order came from a property management company based in Erie. Building 6 at Riverside Industrial Park was experiencing bizarre temperature fluctuations that multiple technicians had failed to resolve. The building, a 3-story office and light manufacturing facility built in 1987, would surge from frigid to sweltering within minutes, then back again, with no apparent pattern. The HVAC system was relatively new, installed only 8 years earlier, and shouldn't have been malfunctioning at all. 3 different service companies had inspected the system and found nothing wrong, yet the problems continued. The property manager offered Thomas triple his usual rate plus expenses for a comprehensive diagnostic. He accepted immediately. Harmonsburg was a small town in Crawford County, up in the northwestern corner of Pennsylvania. The drive from his home in Meadville would take less than an hour. He planned to spend one day on site, identify the problem, and schedule repairs. Easy money. He arrived at Riverside Industrial Park just after 8 a.m. on a frigid January morning. The facility consisted of 8 identical concrete and steel buildings arranged in 2 rows, separated by a central access road. Each building was blocky and utilitarian, with few windows and loading docks on their rear sides. Building 6 sat at the end of the southern row, slightly separated from its neighbors. Thomas noticed immediately that while the other buildings showed signs of activity, cars in the parking areas, lights in windows, movement near the loading docks, Building 6 appeared vacant. No vehicles, no lights, no indication anyone was inside. He parked near the main entrance and checked his paperwork. The building was supposed to be about 60% occupied, with several small businesses leasing office and warehouse space. But the darkened windows and empty parking area suggested otherwise. Thomas tried the main entrance. Locked. He called the property manager, who apologized profusely and said a maintenance worker would arrive within 15 minutes with keys. While waiting, Thomas walked around the building's perimeter. The structure was completely unremarkable, identical to its neighbors in every visible way. He noticed the HVAC units on the roof, 4 large commercial units that appeared new and well-maintained. Nothing suggested any obvious problems. The maintenance worker arrived 20 minutes later, a younger man named Derek who seemed nervous and distracted. He unlocked the main entrance and handed Thomas a set of keys. "You're here about the heating?" Derek asked. "Temperature control issues, yeah. You guys experiencing them today?" Derek nodded quickly. "Building's been crazy for months. Nobody wants to work here anymore. Most of the tenants moved out. The HVAC system is practically new, shouldn't be this much trouble." "It's not the HVAC." Derek lowered his voice, glancing at the building. "It's the building itself." Thomas waited for elaboration, but Derek just shook his head and backed toward his truck. "I've got to get back to Building 3. Call me if you need anything. I'll try to come help, but just call me." He drove off quickly, leaving Thomas standing in the parking lot, wondering what the hell that was about. He dismissed it as typical superstitious nonsense that sometimes developed around problem buildings. People got weird when they were uncomfortable at work, and unexplained temperature swings definitely made people uncomfortable. Thomas entered Building 6. The lobby was standard commercial design: tile floors, drywall, a reception desk that looked like it hadn't been occupied in weeks, directories showing various business names and suite numbers. The temperature felt normal, maybe 68 degrees. The lights were on but motion activated, sections illuminating as he walked. The air smelled stale, like the ventilation hadn't been running properly. He took the stairs to the 3rd floor where the mechanical room was located. The stairwell was concrete and echo-prone, his footsteps bouncing off the walls. He noticed the temperature dropping as he climbed. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, he could see his breath. The mechanical room door was unmarked except for a "Authorized Personnel Only" sign. Thomas unlocked it and stepped into a space that was exactly what he expected. A large room filled with ductwork, pipes, control systems, and the main distribution equipment for the HVAC system. Everything looked clean and properly maintained. He checked the main control panel. All systems showed green. Temperature sensors throughout the building read between 65 and 70 degrees. Yet Thomas knew for a fact the 3rd floor was significantly colder than that. He spent 2 hours running diagnostics. Every component tested normally. The heating system was producing the correct amount of heat. The distribution system was functioning properly. The sensors were accurate when tested against his portable thermometers. Yet somehow the building's temperature was wildly inconsistent with what the system reported. Around 11 a.m., Thomas noticed the temperature changing. He was standing near the control panel when a wave of heat washed over him, sudden and intense. Within 30 seconds, the mechanical room went from cold enough to see his breath to hot enough that he had to remove his jacket. His thermometer showed the temperature had jumped from 53 degrees to 87 degrees in less than a minute. The control panel still showed all temperatures in the normal range. Thomas checked the ductwork, expecting to find a damper failure or blockage that might cause localized heating. Nothing. The heat was ambient, affecting the entire room evenly. He placed multiple thermometers around the space and watched them all climb simultaneously. Yet the building's control system insisted the temperature was stable. Then, as suddenly as it had spiked, the temperature plummeted. Thomas watched his thermometers drop precipitously, going from 87 to 62 to 51 in the span of 2 minutes. He grabbed his jacket and put it back on, his skin prickling with the rapid change. The control panel still showed everything as normal. Thomas had never encountered anything like this. The temperature was definitely changing. He could feel it, his instruments confirmed it, but the building's own sensors didn't register the fluctuations at all. It was as if the HVAC system and the actual environment existed in separate realities. He decided to check the sensors themselves. If they were all malfunctioning in the same way, it would explain why the system wasn't responding to the temperature changes. He left the mechanical room and began working his way through the building floor by floor, testing each sensor location. The third floor was laid out in a standard office configuration. Central hallway with suites on either side, break rooms and restrooms scattered throughout. Most of the suites were empty, their doors standing open to reveal stripped offices with carpet marks where furniture had been. The few occupied spaces were locked, and Thomas saw no signs of current use. He tested sensors in the hallway and empty offices in the break room. Every single one tested as functional and accurate. His portable thermometers agreed with the building sensors. The temperature in all these locations was a comfortable 68 degrees. But the mechanical room, separated from these spaces by only a wall and door, fluctuated wildly. Thomas returned to the mechanical room to find it freezing again. His breath misted in the air. Frost was forming on the metal surfaces of the HVAC equipment. His thermometer read 29 degrees. The control panel showed 70 degrees. This wasn't an HVAC problem. This was something else entirely. He pulled out his phone to call the property manager and report that the issue was beyond his expertise. No signal. He tried twice more, walking around the mechanical room looking for reception. Nothing. His phone showed 0 bars despite having had full signal in the parking lot. Thomas decided to go back downstairs and call from outside. He opened the mechanical room door and stepped into the hallway. The hallway had changed. It was the same layout, the same dimensions, but the quality of light was different. Dimmer despite the same fixtures being lit. The walls looked older, the paint more yellowed, and the temperature was wrong. Sweltering hot, oppressive, like stepping into a sauna. Thomas stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, staring at the hallway. This wasn't possible. Hallways didn't age years in the few hours he'd been in the mechanical room. Buildings didn't spontaneously become hot enough to make him instantly sweat. He stepped back into the mechanical room and pulled the door shut. His heart was racing. He waited 10 seconds, then opened the door again. The hallway was back to normal. Proper lighting, fresh paint, comfortable temperature. Thomas stepped through and let the door close behind him. He walked quickly toward the stairwell, his tools clanking in his bag. The motion sensor lights tracked his progress. Everything appeared normal. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the building had just shown him something impossible. He reached the stairwell door and pulled it open. The stairs descended into darkness. All the lights were out, even though they'd been on when he'd come up earlier. Thomas pulled out his flashlight and shone it down the stairwell. The beam seemed weak, barely penetrating the darkness below. He could see the first landing, but beyond that was just black. He listened. Silence. Complete and total silence. No hum of HVAC equipment, no ambient building sounds, nothing. He started down the stairs, each step echoing strangely, the sound dying too quickly. The temperature changed with each floor. The landing between third and second floor was frigid. The second floor landing was normal. The landing between second and first was sweltering. The pattern made no sense. Thomas reached the first floor door and pulled it open. The lobby beyond was dark except for emergency exit signs. His flashlight beam swept across the space. Everything looked wrong. The furniture was different, older. The reception desk was covered in dust. The directories on the walls showed business names he didn't recognize. He let the door close and stood in the stairwell, trying to control his breathing. Something was very wrong with this building, not with the HVAC system, with the building itself. He pulled out his phone again. Still no signal. But the time display caught his attention. 11:37 a.m. That was wrong. He'd entered the stairwell at 11:35, maybe 11:36. The descent couldn't have taken more than a minute, but his phone showed he'd been in the stairwell for nearly 2 hours. The timestamp read 1:23 p.m. Thomas bolted back up the stairs, no longer caring about investigating or understanding. He just needed to get out. He ran up to the third floor, back down the hallway, back to the mechanical room. He'd leave through the roof access if he had to. Climb down the fire escape, anything to get out of this building. He burst into the mechanical room and stopped. The space had changed. The equipment was different. Older models he recognized from the 1980s and early 90s. The control panel was an analog system, not the digital one he'd been working on. And the temperature was wrong again, shifting rapidly from cold to hot to cold, the air itself seeming to pulse. That's when Thomas heard it. A sound he'd been unconsciously aware of since entering the building but hadn't processed until now. Breathing. Slow, deep, rhythmic breathing. The building was breathing. The temperature changes coincided with the breathing. Cold when it inhaled, hot when it exhaled. The very structure was alive, drawing air in and out, its thermal signature matching the rhythm of lungs. Thomas ran. He found a door marked roof access and took the ladder up, emerging onto the flat roof. The HVAC units were running, but their sound was wrong, organic, like the breathing he'd heard inside but amplified. He ran to the fire escape and started down, his feet clanging on metal stairs, his hands gripping the frozen railings. He reached the ground and ran for his truck, fumbling with his keys, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the door. He started the engine and drove, not looking back at Building 6. On the highway back to Meadville, Thomas's phone suddenly showed full signal again. The time jumped forward, resynchronizing. He'd lost 4 hours somehow. The afternoon was nearly gone, the sun already setting. He called the property manager from a gas station and quit the job. He didn't offer explanations beyond structural issues beyond HVAC scope. He sent his resignation to his employer that night. 22 years of experience meant nothing. He couldn't work in commercial buildings anymore, couldn't trust that the structures around him were inert and dead as they should be. Sometimes, late at night, Thomas still hears it. That slow, deep breathing. He checks his house's furnace, tells himself it's just the HVAC cycling. But he knows the truth. He heard something in Building 6 that wasn't mechanical. Something alive. Something that had been breathing long before the building was constructed and would continue breathing long after it was demolished. The property management company eventually sold Building 6 at a loss. The new owners demolished it within 6 months, citing structural concerns. Thomas heard about the demolition and felt relieved, but then he learned something that brought his nightmares back. The demolition crew reported that the building had been difficult to bring down. The concrete and steel had flexed and moved in ways that made no sense. and when they finally brought down the walls, several crew members reported hearing a sound in the rubble, like something exhaling for the last time. Story 4. The Parallel Highway. David Monroe had been a state trooper for Pennsylvania State Police for 14 years, assigned to Troop F covering the north-central region of the state. He'd worked everything from traffic accidents to criminal investigations, and he'd developed the particular skepticism of long-term law enforcement. He trusted facts, evidence, and training. He didn't believe in ghosts, cryptids, or anything that couldn't be explained by rational cause and effect. The incident on Interstate 80 near Brookville on the night of August 23, 2022, shattered that worldview completely. David was working the midnight shift, patrolling a stretch of I-80 between the towns of Brookville and Clearfield. It was a relatively quiet Tuesday night, light traffic, clear weather. He'd written one speeding ticket around 11 p.m. and responded to a disabled vehicle around midnight. Now, at 1:15 a.m., he was just maintaining presence, his cruiser parked on the shoulder near mile marker 78, watching the sparse traffic flow past. His radio crackled. "All units, we have a report of an erratic driver on I-80 westbound, approaching mile marker 82. Gray sedan, possibly DUI. Any units in the area?" David keyed his mic. "Trooper 247 at marker 78, I can intercept." He pulled onto the highway and accelerated, scanning the westbound lanes ahead. At this time of night, any vehicle was easy to spot. He saw headlights approaching from behind, eastbound traffic, but nothing westbound ahead of him. He maintained speed, watching for the reported vehicle. Mile marker 79, still nothing ahead. Mile marker 80. The highway curved through a section of forest, the tree line pressing close on both sides. Mile marker 81. David checked his rearview mirror and saw the highway behind him, empty and well lit by intermittent overhead lights. Ahead, more empty highway disappearing into darkness. Mile marker 82. He should have encountered the gray sedan by now. He slowed down, wondering if the reporting party had been mistaken about the location. That's when he saw the other highway. It appeared on his right, separated from I-80 by perhaps 50 feet and a stand of trees. Another interstate highway, identical in design to the one he was driving on, complete with the same overhead lighting, the same lane markings, the same road signs. David's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. There was no other highway here. I-80 was the only major route through this area. He'd patrolled this exact stretch thousands of times, but there it was. And driving on it, heading westbound, was a gray sedan with erratic lane discipline, drifting from lane to lane. David immediately radioed dispatch. "Trooper 247, I have eyes on the gray sedan at marker 82, but there's..." "Dispatch, I need verification on highway configuration near marker 82. Are there any parallel routes or access roads?" "Negative 247, I-80 is the only major highway in that area. What's your situation?" David didn't know how to answer that. He was looking at two highways side by side where only one should exist. "I have visual on the suspect vehicle on a... I'm not sure how to describe this. There's another road running parallel to I-80. Silence from dispatch then. 247, please clarify. Are you referring to an access road or service road? Negative. This is a full interstate highway, 4 lanes, overhead lighting, identical to I-80. More silence. 247, there are no other interstate highways in that location. Are you feeling all right? David ignored the question. The gray sedan on the parallel highway was still visible, weaving between lanes. He needed to intercept it. He looked for an access point, any way to get from I-80 to this other highway. The tree line between them was thick, but there had to be a crossover somewhere. He continued driving, watching the parallel highway through the trees. The gray sedan maintained its erratic course, sometimes disappearing behind thicker foliage, then reappearing. David's speedometer showed 65 miles per hour. The sedan seemed to be matching his speed, staying even with him despite its weaving. Mile marker 83. The parallel highway continued, still separated by 50 feet in the tree line. David spotted what looked like an exit ramp ahead, connecting from I-80 to the parallel route. He slowed down, preparing to take it. The ramp was unmarked, no signs indicating where it led. David activated his lights and took the ramp, his cruiser climbing slightly, then leveling out as it curved to the right. The ramp merged onto the parallel highway, and David found himself driving on a road that shouldn't exist. It felt exactly like I-80. Same pavement quality, same lane width, same overhead lighting. But the mile markers were different. Where he should have been at marker 83, the signs showed marker 119. That made no sense. The markers jumped forward 36 miles with no explanation. The gray sedan was ahead of him now, perhaps a quarter-mile distant, still weaving. David accelerated and activated his siren. The sedan didn't respond, didn't slow down or pull over, just continued its erratic path down the highway. David called it in. "Dispatch, I'm in pursuit of the gray sedan. We're now heading westbound on..." He paused, looking at the road signs. They showed I-80 west, but this wasn't the I-80 he knew. On what appears to be I-80, but the mile markers are reading wrong, showing marker 119. 247, you should be at marker 83. Are you certain about your location? Negative, dispatch. Signs clearly show marker 119. Confusion in the dispatcher's voice. 247, that would place you near Penfield, roughly 40 miles from your last reported position. That's not possible. David knew it wasn't possible, but the evidence of his eyes said otherwise. He was driving on a highway that showed mile marker 119, chasing a sedan that had somehow led him 40 miles instantaneously. The sedan ahead suddenly swerved hard right, taking an exit ramp. David followed, his cruiser's lights painting the scene in red and blue. The ramp curved down and to the right, emerging onto a smaller road that looked like a state route. No signs indicated which route. The sedan accelerated once on the smaller road. David pushed his cruiser faster, the speedometer climbing to 80, then 90. The sedan stayed ahead, maintaining its distance. Trees blurred past on both sides. The road twisted through hills and valleys, and David recognized none of the terrain. He'd spent 14 years patrolling this region. He knew every major road and most of the minor ones. This route was completely unfamiliar. Dispatch, pursuit continuing on unknown state route. Suspect vehicle not responding to lights or siren. Request backup. 247, we need your location to dispatch backup. Can you provide coordinates or landmarks? David looked around desperately. Nothing was recognizable. Just dark forest and empty road. I don't know my location. I took an exit from the parallel highway. I'm on an unmarked state route. 2247, there's no parallel highway. You're not making sense. The sedan ahead suddenly braked hard. David slammed his brakes, his cruiser skidding, as he tried to avoid a collision. The sedan came to a complete stop in the middle of the road. David stopped 30 feet behind it, his lights still flashing, his heart pounding. He radioed his position. 247, suspect vehicle is stopped. I'm approaching on foot. Negative 247, wait for backup. David ignored the order. He exited his cruiser, hand on his service weapon, and approached the sedan. Standard procedure, careful steps, attention on the driver's door and the vehicle's interior. The sedan's engine was still running, brake lights glowing red. Driver, turn off your engine and show me your hands. No response. The figure in the driver's seat didn't move. David approached the driver's window, his flashlight raised. Driver, show me your hands. He looked through the window and his blood turned to ice. The driver's seat was empty. So was the entire vehicle. No driver, no passengers. No one at all. But the engine was running, the brake lights were on, and the steering wheel was turned as if someone had just been controlling it. David stepped back, his mind reeling. He circled the vehicle, checking all windows. Completely empty. He tried the driver's door, locked. He shone his flashlight through the windows, checking the back seat, the floor, anywhere someone could hide. Nothing. The sedan was absolutely empty. Dispatch, this is 247. The vehicle is... Dispatch, the suspect vehicle is empty. There's no driver. 247, confirm. Are you saying the driver fled on foot? Negative. The engine is still running. The vehicle is in drive, but there's no one inside. Silence from dispatch. When the voice returned, it sounded concerned. 247, what's your exact location? We're having trouble with your GPS signal. David looked at his cruiser's dashboard computer. The GPS showed no signal. His location on the screen was blank. Dispatch, I don't have GPS. I need to get back to a known location. I'm terminating pursuit and returning to I-80. He returned to his cruiser and put it in gear, intending to turn around and head back the way he'd come. But when he looked back down the road, he couldn't see his own tire tracks. The pavement looked undisturbed, as if no vehicle had driven this way in years. David turned around anyway and started driving back. The road wound through the dark forest. He watched his odometer, counting the miles. He'd chased the sedan for maybe 10 miles. He should be back to the interstate in 10 miles or less, 5 miles. The forest continued unchanging. 10 miles. Still forest. No interstate. 15 miles. David's unease turned to fear. Where was I-80? He should have reached it by now, 20 miles. The road just continued endlessly through identical dark forest. David stopped and tried his radio again. Dispatch 247, I'm unable to locate I-80. Request assistance. Static. Then a voice, but not his dispatcher. A different voice, male, unfamiliar. You can't find I-80 because you're not on your I-80 anymore. David's hand trembled on the radio mic. Who is this? Identify yourself. You took the exit to the parallel highway. Once you're here, you can't get back easily. The roads don't connect the same way. Where am I? You're exactly where you think you are. Pennsylvania. Interstate 80. But a different version. A parallel version. The roads overlap sometimes. People cross over without meaning to. Most never realize it. They just drive and think they're on their normal route. But you noticed. That makes it harder. How do I get back? Keep driving. Eventually you'll find another crossing point. Might be miles, might be hours, or you might not find one at all. Some people just drive forever, trapped in the parallel. They become the erratic drivers that others report. Ghosts on a highway that doesn't quite exist. The radio went silent. David tried calling dispatch again, but got only static. He drove, mile after mile through unchanging forest. His gas gauge slowly dropped. He passed no other vehicles, saw no signs of civilization, just endless pavement and trees. After what felt like hours, the forest suddenly opened up and David found himself approaching an interchange. Interstate signs appeared in his headlights. I-80 east and west. He took the westbound ramp, merging onto a highway that looked exactly like the I-80 he knew. The mile markers resumed normal sequence. Marker 84, marker 85. His GPS suddenly reacquired signal showing his location. His radio crackled back to life. 247, this is dispatch. We lost your signal. What's your status? David looked at his dashboard clock. 1:47 a.m. He'd been gone for 32 minutes according to the clock, but it had felt like hours. His gas gauge showed he'd used nearly half a tank, which should have been impossible in 32 minutes. 247, respond. What's your status? David keyed his mic, his voice hoarse. I'm back on I-80 at marker 85. The pursuit is terminated. Suspect vehicle lost. Do you need assistance? David wanted to say yes. wanted to tell them everything, but he knew how it would sound, knew it would end his career. Negative dispatch. I'm 10-8. He continued his patrol, trying to convince himself he'd experienced some kind of break, a moment of confusion or hallucination brought on by fatigue. But he couldn't explain the missing gas, couldn't explain the time discrepancy, couldn't explain that voice on the radio. 3 days later, another trooper reported an erratic driver on I-80 near mile marker 82, gray sedan weaving between lanes. When the trooper attempted to pursue, the sedan took an unmarked exit ramp and vanished. The trooper reported following the ramp but finding only Forest Service road that dead-ended after 2 miles. No sign of the sedan. David requested the report and read it. Multiple times he recognized the location. Mile marker 82, where he'd first seen the parallel highway. He drives that stretch of I-80 differently now, always watching the tree line on the right. Sometimes, usually late at night when traffic is sparse, he sees it, the parallel highway, the one that shouldn't exist. Sometimes there are vehicles on it driving their routes through a version of Pennsylvania that exists alongside the real one, separated by 50 feet and the thinness of reality itself. David never takes that unmarked exit ramp again. He drives past it, marking its location in his memory, warning other troopers to avoid the area if they can. Most think he's being superstitious, but a few, the ones who've worked late shifts in that section long enough, understand. They've seen the parallel highway too. They know that some roads lead places that maps don't show, and that once you cross over, getting back might be impossible. The gray sedan is still out there, David knows. Still weaving between lanes on a highway that exists in the margins of reality. And somewhere, maybe the trooper who drove that sedan is still trying to find his way home, trapped in an endless patrol on roads that twist through parallel versions of Pennsylvania, forever chasing or forever fleeing. On highways that loop and branch and lead nowhere and everywhere all at once. Story 5. The Voice from the Well. Rebecca Thornton had been a freelance writer for 8 years, specializing in regional history and local interest stories for Pennsylvania magazines and newspapers. She loved the research, the interviews with longtime residents, the sense of uncovering forgotten stories. When she received a commission in September 2020 to write about abandoned homesteads in Venango County, she eagerly accepted. The assignment would take her into the rural backcountry, exploring properties that dated back to the 1800s. She expected to find interesting architecture and poignant reminders of lives once lived. What she found in the woods outside the hamlet of Utica would change her understanding of what could exist in forgotten places. Rebecca had scheduled 3 days for the project, planning to photograph and document 6 different abandoned properties identified by the local historical society. The society's director, an elderly woman named Mrs. Pemberton, had provided hand-drawn maps and brief histories of each location. Most were accessible by Forest Service roads or hiking trails. The last property on Rebecca's list was listed simply as Mercer Homestead, established 1847, abandoned circa 1920s. Mrs. Pemberton had been oddly reluctant to discuss the Mercer property. "It's the most remote," she'd said. "Difficult to reach. Perhaps save that one for last, or skip it entirely if you're short on time." When Rebecca pressed for details, the old woman had just shaken her head. The family left suddenly. No one knows exactly why. The place has been empty ever since. Rebecca saved the Mercer homestead for the final afternoon of her 3rd day. She'd successfully documented the other 5 properties, getting excellent photographs and enough material for a strong article. The Mercer site would be the capstone, the most atmospheric and isolated location. The Forest Service road that led toward the property was barely passable, more of a hiking trail than a road. Rebecca parked her Subaru at the trailhead and hiked in, her camera bag over her shoulder, her GPS tracking her progress. Mrs. Pemberton's map showed the homestead was roughly 2 miles into the forest, accessible by following an old logging trail that branched off the main path. The September afternoon was warm but overcast, the forest quiet except for occasional bird calls. Rebecca found the logging trail exactly where the map indicated and followed it deeper into the woods. The trail was overgrown but still visible, winding between massive oaks and hemlocks that had probably been saplings when the Mercer family lived here. After 45 minutes of hiking, the forest opened into a clearing. The homestead remained remarkably intact for a property abandoned for nearly a century. A 2-story stone house stood at the clearing's center, its roof partially collapsed but its walls solid. A barn foundation was visible beyond it, just stone walls now with no structure above them. And off to the side, half hidden by vegetation, Rebecca saw a stone well. She spent the next hour photographing the house from multiple angles, noting architectural details and the property's overall condition. The stone construction had allowed the building to survive much longer than wooden structures would have. She could still see remnants of window frames, a stone chimney that stood intact, even part of the original front door hanging askew in its frame. The well drew her attention as the afternoon light began to fade. It was a traditional stone-lined well, maybe 4 feet in diameter, with a low wall around its opening. The wooden cover and pulley system had rotted away long ago, leaving the well open to the elements. Rebecca approached carefully, aware that old wells could be dangerous, their openings hidden by vegetation or partially collapsed. She leaned over the stone wall and looked down. The well descended into darkness, the bottom invisible. Rebecca pulled out her phone and activated its flashlight, shining the beam down the shaft. The stone lining continued down at least 40 feet before the light simply failed to reach further. She couldn't see water or the bottom. The well appeared to go down much deeper than typical homestead wells of the era. Rebecca took several photographs of the well, adjusting her settings to capture the texture of the old stones. She was lining up her final shot when she heard it. A voice, faint but distinct, coming from the well. "Hello?" Rebecca froze. The voice was female, young, echoing up from the depths. She looked around the clearing, wondering if someone else had hiked in, perhaps a voice carrying from elsewhere. But the forest was silent. The voice had definitely come from the well. "Hello?" the voice called again. "Is someone there?" Rebecca leaned over the wall. "Yes, are you all right? Are you stuck down there?" A moment of silence, then, "Oh, thank God. I've been calling for hours. I fell in. I can't climb out. Please help me." Rebecca's mind raced. Someone was trapped in the well. How deep had they fallen? Were they injured? She needed to call for rescue immediately. She pulled out her phone. No signal. Of course. She was miles from the nearest cell tower. "Hold on," Rebecca called down. "I'm going to get help. How badly are you hurt?" "My leg is broken and it's so cold down here. Please hurry." "I will. I'm leaving right now. I'll bring back rescue workers. Just stay calm." "What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Mercer." The name hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Mercer. The same name as the family who'd built this homestead. But that was impossible. The Mercers had abandoned this place a century ago. "Emma, how long have you been down there?" "Since this morning. I was exploring and I fell. Please, just get help." Rebecca wanted to ask more questions but stopped herself. A traumatized person trapped in a well didn't need an interrogation. She needed rescue. Rebecca grabbed her bag and started back toward the trail at a run. She'd hike back to her car, drive until she had cell signal, and call 911. 2 hours, maybe 3. The woman would be okay that long if she'd already survived since morning. Rebecca made excellent time, practically running down the trail. She reached her car in just over half an hour, threw her equipment in the back, and started driving. She drove for 20 minutes before her phone showed one bar of signal. She immediately called 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'm reporting someone trapped in a well. Old Mercer Homestead off Forest Service Road 224 in Venango County. A woman named Emma, she says her leg is broken. The dispatcher took down the information and said emergency services would be dispatched immediately. Rebecca provided as much detail as she could about the location, then offered to drive back and meet the rescue team at the trailhead. That won't be necessary, ma'am. We know the location. You've done the right thing calling it in. Rebecca waited at the trailhead anyway, wanting to ensure the rescue team found the right path. A fire department rescue truck arrived 30 minutes later, followed by an ambulance. Rebecca showed them Mrs. Pemberton's map and explained the route to the homestead. The fire chief, a man in his 50s, studied the map with a strange expression. The old Mercer well? Yes. A woman named Emma fell in. She said she's been down there since this morning. The chief exchanged glances with his crew. Ma'am, how deep would you say that well is? At least 40 feet, maybe deeper. I couldn't see the bottom. The chief nodded slowly. Wait here. We'll investigate. The rescue team headed into the forest with ropes, harnesses, and medical equipment. Rebecca waited, anxious and confused by the chief's reaction. Something about his expression suggested he wasn't surprised by the call. An hour and a half later, the rescue team returned. No stretcher, no rescued person. The chief approached Rebecca with a careful, measured expression. Ma'am, there's no one in that well. What? But I heard her. She was calling for help. We rappelled down with lights and cameras. The well goes down 87 feet. There's maybe 3 feet of water at the bottom, but no person. No sign anyone has been down there in decades. Rebecca stared at him. That's impossible. I spoke with her. She told me her name was Emma Mercer. The fire chief's expression changed to something like sympathy mixed with unease. Ma'am, Emma Mercer was a real person. She was 12 years old in 1922. She fell into that well in October of that year. The family tried for 3 days to get her out, but the well was too deep and too narrow. She died down there. The family left immediately afterward. The well was supposed to have been sealed, but I guess it never was. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. No. I spoke to someone. Today. She answered me. People have reported hearing voices from that well before. Hikers, hunters, photographers like yourself. It's been going on for decades. Some people think it's just echoes or wind through the shaft. But everyone who hears it says the same thing. A young girl asking for help, saying her name is Emma. Rebecca wanted to argue, to insist she'd heard a real person, but the certainty in the chief's voice stopped her. He'd dealt with this before, multiple times. What happens to the people who hear it? Rebecca asked quietly. The chief glanced at his crew who were packing equipment back into the truck. Most just leave and try to forget about it. A few come back, though. They say they feel guilty for not helping. They hear that voice and they can't shake the feeling that someone's really trapped down there. But no one is. No one living, anyway. Rebecca drove back to her hotel room in Cranberry, an hour south of Utica. She tried to work on her article but couldn't concentrate. The voice from the well kept echoing in her memory. So clear, so real. A young girl, desperate and frightened, calling for help that never came. She researched the Mercer family online. The records were sparse, but she found Emma Mercer's death certificate from 1922. Cause of death, accidental drowning. The family had indeed left the homestead immediately after moving to Ohio. None of them ever returned to Pennsylvania. Rebecca tried to convince herself she'd experienced an auditory hallucination, her mind playing tricks after hearing so much about abandoned homesteads and tragic histories. But she couldn't shake the absolute clarity of that voice. The specific words, the name. 3 days later, Rebecca returned to the Mercer homestead. She couldn't explain why. She just needed to go back. She hiked in during the afternoon, the trail familiar now. The clearing appeared exactly as she'd left it, the stone house silent in the dappled sunlight. The well waited, its dark opening like a mouth frozen in a perpetual scream. Rebecca approached slowly. She leaned over the stone wall and looked down into the darkness. "Emma," she called softly. Silence, just the distant sound of wind through the trees. "Emma, it's Rebecca. I came back." More silence. Rebecca felt foolish. What was she doing? Talking to a well where a girl had died a century ago. Then faintly, "You came back." Rebecca's breath caught. The voice was there again, echoing up from the depths. Younger than she remembered, more childlike. "Yes, I came back. I'm sorry I couldn't help you. It's so dark down here. It's been dark for so long." Tears formed in Rebecca's eyes. "I know, I'm so sorry. Everyone leaves. They hear me and they leave. They promise to help, but they never come back. The rescue team came. They looked for you. I know. I saw their lights, but they couldn't see me. I'm too far away now, too far in the dark." Rebecca didn't understand what that meant, but the sadness in the voice was overwhelming. "What can I do? How can I help you?" A long pause. When the voice came again, it sounded wistful, distant. "Tell people I was here. Tell them Emma Mercer lived in this house. Tell them I wasn't just an accident. I was real. I had a family. I was loved. I will, I promise. Thank you. Will you come back again?" Rebecca wanted to say yes, but something held her back. Coming back felt wrong, like encouraging something that shouldn't exist. "I don't know if I should. Please. It's so lonely down here in the dark. Just sometimes. Just so I know someone remembers." Rebecca left without promising anything. She hiked back to her car with tears streaming down her face, grief for a girl who died a century ago mixing with confusion about what she'd actually experienced. She wrote her article about the abandoned homesteads, including a respectful section about the Mercer family and Emma's tragic death. The article was published in October, exactly 98 years after Emma fell into the well. Rebecca did go back. She couldn't help herself. She returned once a month for the next year, hiking to the remote homestead and speaking into the well. Sometimes Emma answered. Sometimes there was only silence. The conversations were always brief, always sad, always leaving Rebecca feeling hollowed out and haunted. Other people started visiting too after reading Rebecca's article. The local historical society reported increased interest in the Mercer homestead. Some visitors claimed they heard the voice. Others heard nothing. The fire department responded to 3 more rescue calls from people convinced someone was trapped in the well. Each time they found nothing but ancient stone and dark water. Mrs. Pemberton, the Historical Society director, died in March 2021. In her papers, Rebecca's article was found with a note attached. Finally, someone told Emma's story properly. Perhaps now she can rest. Rebecca visited the homestead in April, a month after Mrs. Pemberton's death. She called down into the well as she always did. No answer. Just silence and darkness. She's returned twice since then. The well remains silent. No voice calls up from the depths. Rebecca tells herself this is good, that whatever presence existed there has finally moved on. But part of her mourns that connection, that strange relationship with a voice from the past. The well still stands open to the sky, stone walls solid after nearly 2 centuries. Hikers still find the homestead and photograph the ruins. And occasionally someone will lean over that stone wall, look down into the darkness, and hear a faint voice calling up from depths that shouldn't be able to hold sound. A young girl's voice asking if anyone is there. saying her name is Emma, asking, "Please, won't you help me? Won't you stay? Won't you remember that I was real?" The voice of Emma Mercer, who fell into darkness in 1922 and has been calling out ever since, trapped in a moment of terror that never ends, in a well that goes down further than stone and earth should allow, down into some deeper darkness where lost things wait and call and hope that someone someday will answer and stay and remember. Story 6. The Following Man. Catherine Hayes had been a rural mail carrier for 11 years, servicing a route that covered 83 miles of back roads in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. She drove the same circuit 6 days a week, delivering to farmhouses and rural residences scattered across rolling hills and hollows. She knew every mailbox, every dog, every tricky driveway. The route was predictable, almost meditative in its repetition. Nothing ever changed. Until December 2021, when the following man appeared in her rearview mirror and Catherine learned that some patterns once started cannot be broken. It was December 8th, a Wednesday, cold and overcast with threats of snow. Catherine started her route at 9 a.m. as always, driving her Subaru Outback loaded with mail and packages. The Postal Service had been phasing out traditional mail trucks for rural routes, allowing carriers to use personal vehicles equipped with Postal Service equipment. Catherine had customized her Outback with extended side mirrors and a dashboard-mounted GPS that tracked her route stops. The morning went normally. She delivered to the clustered mailboxes near the town of Somerset, then headed out into the rural sections where homes were separated by miles. She knew the rhythm perfectly. Drive, stop, deliver, drive. The roads were quiet, the landscape familiar and unchanging. Around 11 a.m. she turned onto Meadowview Road, a 5-mile stretch that served 6 properties. The road wound through forested hills, narrow and winding, rarely used except by residents. Catherine glanced in her rearview mirror out of habit as she accelerated onto the road. A man was walking behind her vehicle, maybe 50 yards back, walking directly down the center of the road. Catherine frowned. She hadn't seen any houses or parked cars that would explain a pedestrian on this remote road. Where had he come from? She slowed down, assuming he'd moved to the side of the road or she'd pass him as she continued her deliveries. But when she looked in the mirror again after delivering to the first mailbox, the man was closer. Still walking down the center of the road. Still the same distance behind her, maybe 50 yards, despite the fact that she'd driven forward several hundred feet. Catherine felt the first twinkling of unease. She continued to the second mailbox, delivered the mail, and checked her mirror again. The man was still there. Still 50 yards back. Still walking steadily down the center of the road. This was wrong. She'd driven another quarter mile. The man should be far behind her by now, impossible to see. But there he was, maintaining the exact same distance, walking at a pace that shouldn't be able to keep up with a vehicle driving at road speeds. Catherine accelerated, pushing her Outback to 40 miles per hour, faster than was safe on the winding road. She delivered to the third mailbox quickly and checked her mirror before pulling away. The man was 50 yards behind her. Same distance, same steady walk. Catherine's heart started pounding. This wasn't possible. She was driving at speeds that should make the man a distant speck in her mirror, if visible at all. But he maintained that 50-yard distance with a walk that looked casual, unhurried, normal except for the impossibility of it. She tried to get a better look at him. Average height, average build, wearing dark clothing. No distinctive features she could make out at this distance. Just a man walking down a country road, except that his walking defied the laws of physics and distance. Catherine grabbed her cell phone and tried calling her supervisor. No signal. Meadowview Road was in a dead zone, which she knew from 11 years of experience. She was alone with whatever this man was. She delivered to the remaining 3 mailboxes on Meadowview Road as quickly as possible, her hands shaking. Each time she checked her mirror, the man was there, 50 yards back, walking steadily, following. The road eventually intersected with County Route 403. Catherine turned right without signaling, accelerating hard. She looked in her mirror. The road behind her was empty for a few seconds. Relief flooded through her. Whatever had been happening on Meadowview Road, she'd left it behind. Then the man appeared, walking around the corner onto Route 403, still 50 yards back, still following. Catherine drove faster, taking curves recklessly. She passed 2 other vehicles, both driving the opposite direction. Surely they'd see the man walking in the road. Surely someone else would witness this impossibility. But when she checked her mirror after the vehicles passed, the man was still there. The other drivers showed no reaction, no brake lights, no indication they'd seen anything unusual. Catherine completed the next section of her route in a panic, barely registering which mailboxes she was servicing. Her entire attention was on the rearview mirror and the figure that followed her relentlessly. The man never got closer than 50 yards, never fell further behind, just walked, constant and implacable, through turns and straightaways, maintaining that impossible distance. At 12:30 p.m., Catherine reached a section of her route that ran through the small community of Garrett. Houses lined the road, a fire station sat on one corner, a gas station on another. Civilization, safety. Catherine pulled into the gas station parking lot and parked near the entrance where security cameras would cover her vehicle. She looked in her mirror. The man was standing at the edge of the parking lot, 50 yards away, not walking anymore, just standing, watching her vehicle. Catherine ran into the gas station. The clerk, a teenager with earbuds in, looked up in surprise as she burst through the door. "Call the police," Catherine said, her voice shaking. "There's a man following me. He's been following me for miles." The clerk pulled out his earbuds. "What?" "Outside, in the parking lot. There's a man who's been following my car." The clerk leaned to look through the window. "I don't see anyone." Catherine turned to look. The parking lot was empty. No man. No one standing at the edge. Just her Subaru and 2 other parked vehicles. "He was right there," Catherine insisted, "standing at the edge of the lot." The clerk gave her a concerned look. "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" Catherine stepped outside, looking around the parking lot and the surrounding street. No sign of the man. It was as if he'd vanished the moment she'd left her vehicle. She called her supervisor from the gas station phone. She explained what had happened, trying to sound calm and rational despite her shaking voice. Her supervisor suggested she take a break, get some lunch, and call back if she felt unable to complete her route. Catherine ate lunch at a small diner in Garrett, forcing herself to calm down. She'd experienced something strange, maybe a hallucination brought on by stress or lack of sleep. The mail carrier job was more demanding than people realized. Long hours, all weather conditions, tight schedules. Maybe she'd been pushing too hard. She returned to her vehicle an hour later, determined to finish her route. She had another 40 miles and approximately 60 deliveries left. She could do this. She would do this. The afternoon section of her route took her through more rural areas, including a section of narrow dirt roads that served properties deep in the hills. Catherine focused on the work, on the familiar rhythm of stopping and delivering, trying not to check her mirror compulsively. But at 2:45 p.m. on a dirt road called Timber Ridge Trail, she glanced in the mirror and saw him again. The man, walking behind her, 50 yards back. Catherine's calm shattered. She accelerated, her Outback bouncing over ruts and potholes. The man followed, his walk unchanged, the distance maintained. Catherine drove faster, dangerously fast for the conditions. The man kept pace. She completed the Timber Ridge deliveries in a blur of terror, then raced back to paved roads. The man followed through every turn, every acceleration, every attempt to lose him. When she slowed, he remained 50 yards back. When she sped up, he stayed 50 yards back. The distance never changed. Catherine finished her route at 4:30 p.m., 3 hours of deliveries completed while the following man maintained his position in her mirror. When she finally pulled into the post office parking lot in Somerset, she sat in her vehicle shaking, unable to immediately get out. She looked in her mirror. The man stood at the edge of the parking lot, 50 yards away, just standing, watching. Catherine reported the incident to her supervisor and the local police. She described everything in detail. The police took a report but seemed skeptical. No one else had seen the man. No security cameras at the gas station had captured him. There was no physical evidence of anyone following her. Catherine took 2 days off, trying to recover her nerve. She'd worked this route for 11 years. She couldn't let one strange experience end her career. She convinced herself it had been a hallucination, stress-induced or perhaps caused by carbon monoxide from a leak in her vehicle's exhaust system. She had the Outback inspected, no leaks, no mechanical problems that could cause hallucinations. She returned to work on December 13th, determined to push through her fear. The morning went well. No following man, no mysterious figure in her mirror. Catherine began to relax, convinced the incident had been an isolated event. Then at 11 a.m., she turned onto Meadowview Road again. The man appeared in her mirror immediately, 50 yards back. Walking down the center of the road, Catherine's blood turned to ice. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. This was happening again. The no pattern repeated exactly as before. The man followed her through her entire route, maintaining that 50-yard distance, appearing and disappearing as she entered and exited her vehicle, present in her mirror but invisible to everyone else. This continued every day Catherine worked, every single route, every single day. The following man appeared somewhere during her deliveries and stayed with her until she returned to the post office. Sometimes he appeared early in the route, sometimes later. But he always appeared, and once he appeared, he followed until the route ended. Catherine tried everything. She changed her route order, hoping to avoid triggering whatever brought the man. He appeared anyway. She drove with someone else in her vehicle, a supervisor conducting a ride-along evaluation. Catherine could see the man in her mirror, but the supervisor saw nothing. Catherine asked the supervisor to watch the mirror. "What do you see behind us?" The supervisor looked. "Nothing. Empty road." Catherine had her eyes examined. Perfect vision. She saw a therapist who prescribed anti-anxiety medication. The medication helped her cope with the stress but didn't stop the man from appearing. She switched vehicles using a different car for her route. The man followed that vehicle too. Other mail carriers started noticing Catherine's distress. Some expressed concern. Others grew distant, uncomfortable with her increasingly erratic behavior. Catherine knew what they thought, that she was having a breakdown, that the stress had finally broken her. In March 2022, Catherine took a leave of absence. She couldn't continue working while being followed by something impossible that only she could see. She needed time to figure out what was happening and how to stop it. During her leave, Catherine researched obsessively. She looked for similar reports, for folklore about following men or shadowy figures. She found stories of doppelgangers, of shadow people, of paranormal entities that attached themselves to individuals. Nothing quite matched her experience. She also noticed something disturbing. The following man had expanded beyond her mail route. She saw him now when she drove anywhere. Grocery store, doctor's appointments, visits to friends. 50 yards back in her rearview mirror. Always walking, always following, always maintaining that exact distance. He'd followed her on her mail route for 3 months before appearing in her personal life. Now he was everywhere. Catherine couldn't drive without seeing him in her mirror. She started taking Uber and buses. The following man appeared behind those vehicles too. Catherine moved from Somerset to Philadelphia in June 2022, hoping distance would break whatever connection existed. The following man appeared in Philadelphia. She took a train to New York City. The following man was there too, visible in the reflection of train windows, maintaining his 50-yard distance even on a moving train. Catherine stopped driving entirely. She sold her car and used only public transportation or walked. The following man adapted. When she walked, he walked behind her, maintaining that 50-yard distance. She could never look directly at him. Whenever she turned around, he was too far away to see clearly, just a figure in dark clothing. But in mirrors, in windows, in any reflective surface, she could see him clearly. A man without distinctive features, average in every way. Following, always following. She consulted with paranormal investigators, with religious leaders, with anyone who might have answers. No one could help. Some couldn't see the man even when Catherine pointed him out in reflections. Others claimed to see him but had no explanation for what he was or how to make him stop. By December 2022, exactly 1 year after he first appeared, Catherine had resigned herself to living with the following man. He was a constant presence 50 yards behind her, in every mirror and reflection, following wherever she went. She learned to live with it the way people learn to live with chronic pain. Acknowledge it exists. Don't let it consume you. Continue functioning despite it. She found work as a transcriptionist, a job she could do from home. She rarely left her apartment anymore. But even inside, she knew he was there, outside her window if she looked. In the reflection of her computer screen if she tilted it right. 50 yards away. Constant, eternal. Catherine sometimes wonders what he wants, why he follows, whether he's following others too, invisible shadows trailing behind unknowing people, maintaining their distances in mirrors and reflections. She wonders if everyone has a following man and she's simply the only one who can see hers. Or worse, if she's the only one being followed. The only one selected for this constant, unchanging observation. Pursued forever at a distance that never changes by something that walks when she drives, that appears when she flees, that maintains its 50-yard separation through all dimensions and distances like a fundamental law of her personal universe. The following man is behind her now, right now, in the reflection of her phone screen as she reads this, 50 yards away through walls and space that shouldn't allow such sight. He's always there, always following, and he'll be there tomorrow and the day after and every day for the rest of Catherine's life. 50 yards back, never closer, never further, following forever. Story 7, The Static Town. Aaron Bishop had been a broadcast engineer for 17 years, working primarily in radio and television transmitter maintenance across western Pennsylvania. He specialized in remote sites, the mountaintop transmitter stations and isolated towers that beamed signals across rural areas. He was comfortable with solitude, with long drives to access sites, with the technical challenges of keeping aging equipment functional. The job was steady, well-paying, and suited his personality. The assignment that came through in February 2023 seemed routine. Investigate signal interference affecting multiple stations near the town of Milford, population 603 in Greene County. What Aaron discovered wasn't a technical problem, it was something that shouldn't exist, hidden in a town that was more static than substance. The interference reports had been coming in for 2 weeks. AM radio station WGME in Waynesburg was experiencing periodic dropout. 2 FM stations based in Washington were getting complaints about static at specific listening locations. A TV broadcast tower was registering unusual signal reflections. All the problems seemed centered around Milford, a tiny town tucked into the hills near the West Virginia border. Aaron loaded his testing equipment and drove down from Pittsburgh on February 16th, a Thursday morning clear and cold. The drive took 2 hours, carrying him through progressively smaller towns and more rural landscape. He'd been to Milford once before, years ago, and remembered it as utterly unremarkable. A crossroads town with a gas station, a church, maybe 20 houses. Blink and you'd miss it. His GPS guided him off Route 21 onto a county road, then onto a smaller road that twisted through forested hills. The last turn put him on a road that should lead directly into Milford. According to his GPS, the town was ahead less than a mile. Aaron crested a hill and looked down at Milford. The town sat in a small valley, visible in its entirety from this vantage point. Something about it looked wrong. The buildings were there, houses, a church, what looked like a gas station. But they appeared flat somehow, two-dimensional, like a photograph rather than real structures. Aaron blinked and the impression faded. Just a trick of the winter light, he told himself. He drove down into the town and immediately noticed the interference. His truck's radio, tuned to a Pittsburgh station for the drive, suddenly erupted in static so loud he had to turn it off. The GPS display flickered, showing his position jumping erratically. Even his cell phone screen showed static-like interference, the display glitching. Aaron pulled over at what looked like the town's main intersection. 4 roads met here, with the gas station on one corner and the church on another. He turned off his engine and sat for a moment, looking around. The town was completely still. No movement, no people, no vehicles except his own truck. The gas station's lights were on, but he couldn't see anyone inside. The church looked maintained but empty. Houses lined the side streets, most with cars in their driveways, but no signs of life. No smoke from chimneys despite the cold. No curtains moving, no dogs barking. Aaron got out of his truck and immediately noticed the sound. Or rather, the lack of sound. Silence. Complete and total silence. No wind, no birds, no distant traffic, noise. Just silence overlaid with a faint hissing like white noise at the edge of hearing. He walked toward the gas station. The building looked functional but strange in ways he couldn't immediately articulate. The proportions seemed slightly off, the colors too uniform, like a stage set or a video game rendering rather than a real building. The door was unlocked. Aaron pushed it open and stepped inside. The bell above the door didn't ring. The interior was laid out like any small-town gas station. Shelves of snacks and basic goods, a register counter, coolers against the back wall. But everything was too neat, too perfectly arranged. The products on the shelves looked right from a distance but wrong up close. Cans without brand names. Packaging that looked generic and odd, and everything was covered in a thin layer of fine dust. "Hello?" Aaron called. His voice sounded muffled, absorbed too quickly by the space. No answer. The building was empty. Aaron walked behind the counter. The register was an older mechanical model, the kind rarely seen anymore. He pressed a key. Nothing happened. He tried to open the cash drawer. It wouldn't budge, not locked, but simply immovable, as if the entire register was one solid piece instead of a functional machine. He left the gas station and walked down the main street. The houses were all similar to the gas station, superficially normal but wrong in subtle ways. Windows that didn't quite reflect properly. Doors with handles that seemed painted on rather than attached. One house had a car in the driveway, a sedan from the 1990s. Aaron looked through the car window. The interior was there, seats, steering wheel, dashboard, but it all looked molded from a single piece, non-functional, a suggestion of a car rather than an actual vehicle. Aaron's unease grew with each observation. This wasn't a normal town. These weren't real buildings. The entire place was, he struggled for the right word, false, artificial, a simulation or replica of a town rather than an actual town. He remembered the population figure, 603 people. Where were they? Aaron walked toward the church, a white wooden building with a small steeple. The front doors were open. He climbed the steps and entered. The sanctuary was arranged in traditional style, pews, an altar, a pulpit. But the pews were empty, and when Aaron touched one, felt wrong. The wood was too smooth, too uniform. He knocked on it. The sound was dull, wrong, like knocking on plastic rather than wood. He looked up at the windows. Stained glass, but the images were strange. Abstract patterns that hurt to look at, that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. Aaron looked away quickly, a headache forming behind his eyes. In the silence, he heard it. Faint, almost imperceptible. Voices, or rather the suggestion of voices, indistinct and overlapping like radio transmissions bleeding through static. Aaron turned slowly, trying to pinpoint the source. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from the air itself. He pulled out his radio frequency detector, a device he used to identify broadcast signals. The detector went wild, showing signals across the entire spectrum, AM, FM, VHF, UHF. Every frequency showed activity. But the signals weren't organized or channelized like normal broadcasts. They were chaos, overlapping and interfering, creating a blanket of electromagnetic noise. Aaron left the church and walked back toward the center of town. The voices in the static grew louder, more distinct. He could almost make out words, almost understand what they were saying. He strained to listen, holding up his detector. The device showed a particular concentration of signal near one house, a 2-story home painted pale yellow. Aaron approached it slowly. The front door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The interior was dark and, unlike the other buildings, actually furnished. A living room with a couch and chairs, a kitchen visible through a doorway, stairs leading to a second floor. And covering every surface, every wall, every piece of furniture were layers upon layers of paper. Thousands of sheets taped and tacked and piled everywhere. Aaron stepped closer to examine them. The papers were covered in writing, handwritten text, dense and cramped, filling every inch of every page. Aaron picked up one sheet and tried to read it. The words made no sense, random combinations of letters and words, occasionally forming partial phrases that seemed meaningful but weren't. The signal carries through the static. We are transmission and static both. The town remembers its frequency. Aaron walked through the house, finding more papers. Every room was covered. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands of sheets, all filled with this incomprehensible writing. In the kitchen, he found a typewriter on the table, a sheet of paper still loaded in it. The paper showed the same kind of text, partial words and phrases that didn't connect. Upstairs, he found bedrooms similarly papered. In one room, a desk sat by the window covered in radio equipment. Old tube radios, crystal sets, modern digital receivers, all connected in a chaotic web of wires. A large antenna was visible through the window attached to the roof. Aaron examined the equipment. All of it was non-functional, the wires not actually connected, the radio's hollow shells. But his detector showed enormous signal strength in this room concentrated around the equipment. He was about to leave when he noticed a photograph on the desk, partially buried under papers. He pulled it out. It showed a family, parents and 2 children standing in front of this house. The photo looked recent, maybe from the 2000s. On the back, written in pen, "The Milford family, 2003, we listen." Aaron took the photo and left the house. He walked back to his truck, his mind trying to process what he'd found. Milford wasn't a real town. It was some kind of replica, a shell containing something else, something related to radio signals and static and those overlapping voices he could hear in the silence. He started his truck and immediately his radio came back on, exploding with static and those half-heard voices. The GPS showed his position jumping erratically across the map. His cell phone screen displayed nonsense characters and fragmented images. Aaron tried to drive out of town the way he'd come in. The road seemed right, curving up and out of the valley. But after a mile of driving, he found himself back at the main intersection in Milford. He tried again, taking a different road. Same result. Back at the intersection. He tried a third road, then a fourth. Every route led back to the center of town. The roads looped somehow, or the town refused to let him leave, or space itself bent in this valley. Aaron pulled over and tried to think rationally. He needed to report this. He grabbed his cell phone. Still no signal, just that static-filled screen. He tried his radio. Same static with those voices underneath. Then, through the static, he heard something clear. A voice. Male, speaking directly to him. "You shouldn't have come here." Aaron grabbed his radio mic. "Who is this? Identify yourself." Static then. "We're Milford, all of us. We've been Milford since the transmission started." "What transmission? What are you talking about?" In 1983, there was an experiment, a new broadcast technology. They tested it here. The whole town listened. The signal was wrong. It changed us, made us part of the static. Now we're not people anymore. We're transmission, signal without source. Aaron's blood ran cold. "That's impossible." "You're an engineer. Check your equipment. The signal's coming from this town. They're not from any tower. They're coming from us. From what we became." Aaron looked at his radio frequency detector. The signals were indeed coming from the town itself, from the buildings, from the air, not from any identifiable transmitter source. "The town you see isn't real," the voice continued. "It's the echo of what was here. We maintain the echo through the static. We exist in the electromagnetic spectrum now, between stations, in the noise. How do I leave? You don't. You came into the transmission, now you're part of it. Your equipment, your truck, you're all resonating at our frequency now. You'll stay in Milford. You'll become static like we did." Aaron refused to accept this. He drove again, trying desperately to find a road that would lead out. Every attempt brought him back to the center. Hours passed. The winter afternoon faded to evening. The town's false lights came on, illuminating nothing. The static grew louder, and Aaron could now clearly hear hundreds of voices in it, overlapping and echoing, all saying fragments of sentences that didn't connect. He tried leaving his truck and walking out. The roads looped the same way. He tried cutting through the forest. After walking for what felt like miles, he emerged back onto a road in Milford. Night fell completely. Aaron sat in his truck, his equipment showing impossible readings, voices coming from his radio telling him about the transmission, about becoming static, about the 603 people who'd listened to an experimental broadcast in 1983 and were transformed into something that existed as signal rather than flesh. Around midnight, Aaron noticed he could see his hand becoming translucent. Not fading exactly, but losing solidity, becoming grainy like a bad photograph. He felt strange, distant from his own body. The voices in the static were becoming clearer, more understandable. He was beginning to recognize patterns in their overlapping speech. By dawn, Aaron Bishop understood. He was becoming part of Milford, part of the transmission. His physical form was converting to signal, to pattern, to static that would add to the electromagnetic chorus that broadcast from this valley. A week later, broadcast engineers from Pittsburgh drove to Milford to investigate why Aaron hadn't returned. They found his truck at the main intersection, all his equipment still inside, running on battery power that should have died days ago. Aaron was gone. No sign of where he'd gone or what had happened. The interference affecting radio stations near Milford continues. If you tune carefully between stations in the static, you can sometimes hear voices. 604 voices now, overlapping and echoing, broadcasting their transformed existence from a town that looks real, but isn't. A place where 603 people listened to a signal that changed them fundamentally, and where a 604th person arrived to investigate and became another voice in the static. Milford still appears on maps. The population sign still reads 603, no one's updated it. And sometimes, late at night, radio receivers in western Pennsylvania will pick up a clear signal from that valley. An engineer's voice, Aaron Bishop's voice, transmitting a warning through the static. Don't come to Milford, don't listen to the signal. We're here in the frequencies between the stations and we can't stop broadcasting. Can't stop being signal, we're static now. We're the town that doesn't exist except as transmission. And we're always broadcasting, always calling, hoping someone will listen, hoping someone will understand. And then his voice dissolves back into static, back into the overlapping 604 voices that broadcast from Milford, Pennsylvania. A town that exists on maps, that appears in GPS databases, but that isn't quite real anymore. A place between stations, a town made of static. Story 8, The Ascending Stairs. Natalie Okoye had been a physical therapist for 9 years, operating a small practice in Honesdale, Pennsylvania. She specialized in rehabilitation for elderly patients and worked closely with several nursing homes and assisted living facilities in Wayne County. Her job required her to travel to various facilities, conducting therapy sessions and assessments. She was familiar with the peculiarities of old buildings, the strange layouts, the outdated designs, the additions built over decades that created confusing floor plans. But when she was assigned a new patient at Riverside Manor in the hamlet of Tyler Hill in November 2022, she encountered a staircase that didn't follow any architectural logic, one that seemed to climb higher than the building itself contained, and that would fundamentally alter her understanding of space and reality. The initial call came from Riverside Manor's administrator on November 3rd. They had a new resident, Mrs. Catherine Voss, age 87, who'd suffered a fall and needed intensive physical therapy. The facility was small, only 32 residents housed in a converted mansion that dated to the 1890s. Natalie had never worked there before, but the location was convenient and the pay was good. She arrived for her first session on November 7th, a Monday morning, gray and cold. Tyler Hill was barely a town, more of a scattered collection of homes along rural roads near the Delaware River. Riverside Manor sat on a hilltop, a 3-story Victorian mansion with multiple additions and wings that had been added over the decades. The building looked impressive in a deteriorating way, its grandeur faded but still visible. Natalie met with the administrator, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Hirsch, who explained Mrs. Voss's condition and therapy needs. Hip fracture, recovering from surgery, needed help regaining mobility. Straightforward case. Mrs. Voss's room was on the 3rd floor, east wing. Mrs. Hirsch walked Natalie to the main staircase. I should warn you, the building's layout is confusing. It's been modified so many times over the years. If you get lost, just ask any staff member. I'll manage, Natalie said, accustomed to navigating complex facility layouts. She climbed to the 2nd floor without issue. The staircase was wide and carpeted with ornate wooden banisters. The 2nd floor hallway extended in both directions, lined with resident rooms. Natalie continued up to the 3rd floor, her therapy bag heavy on her shoulder. The 3rd floor was smaller with fewer rooms, the ceiling lower. Natalie found the east wing corridor and located room 317, Mrs. Voss's room. She knocked and entered. Mrs. Voss was a small, sharp-eyed woman sitting in a wheelchair by the window. You're the therapist? Yes, ma'am. Natalie Okoye. I'm here to help you with your recovery. The session went well. Mrs. Voss was determined and cooperative, following Natalie's instructions carefully. After an hour of exercises and mobility work, Natalie wrapped up and prepared to leave. "Same time Wednesday?" Natalie asked. "Before you go," Mrs. Voss said quietly. "You came up the main stairs?" "Yes." "Did you notice anything unusual?" Natalie paused. "No." "Why?" Mrs. Voss looked out the window. "I've been here 3 weeks. Sometimes at night I hear footsteps on the stairs going up, always up, never coming back down. Old buildings settle. They make strange sounds. These aren't settling sounds, these are footsteps, and they keep going up past the 3rd floor. I can hear them going higher, but there is no 4th floor." Natalie offered a reassuring smile. "I'll see you Wednesday, Mrs. Voss." She left the room and headed back toward the main staircase. The 3rd floor corridor seemed longer than she remembered, but she'd been focused on finding the room earlier. She reached the staircase and started down. At the landing between 3rd and 2nd floor, she stopped. The stairs continued up behind her, beyond the 3rd floor. She turned around and looked. A section of staircase ascended past the 3rd floor landing, disappearing around a corner. She hadn't noticed it on the way up, her attention focused on climbing. Natalie frowned. Mrs. Voss had said there was no 4th floor, but clearly these stairs went somewhere. Maybe maintenance access, storage. Old mansions often had attic spaces. She climbed back up past the 3rd floor landing. The stairs narrowed slightly, the carpet replaced by bare wood. The lighting dimmed. After a dozen steps, the staircase turned and continued upward. Natalie followed, curious now. Another dozen steps. The staircase turned again. The walls here were plain plaster, unpainted, water-stained. The temperature dropped noticeably. Natalie could see her breath. She reached another landing. The stairs continued up, but this was wrong. She'd climbed at least 2 full floors beyond the 3rd. The building couldn't be this tall. From outside, Riverside Manor was clearly a 3-story structure. Natalie pulled out her phone to check the time. 11:47 a.m. Her session had ended at 11:30. She'd been climbing for maybe 2 minutes. That wasn't long enough to have climbed 2 floors, yet here she was, on a landing that should be at least 5th floor height. She decided to continue, reasoning she'd reach a door or access point soon. The stairs kept ascending, turn after turn, landing after landing. The walls became rougher, the stairs less finished. After what felt like 10 minutes, Natalie stopped and looked back down. She couldn't see the 3rd floor landing anymore. The staircase descended into darkness below her. Above, it continued into similar darkness. The lighting, which had been dim, now seemed to come from nowhere specific, just a general grayness that let her see the steps, but not their source. Natalie's heart began to race. This was wrong. She'd been climbing for too long. She must be hundreds of feet above the ground by now. That was impossible in a 3-story building. She turned and started descending quickly. Down and down, turn after turn. She counted steps. After descending what should have been at least 3 full floors, she saw no landmark, no door, no change, just more staircase. Panic edged into her chest. She descended faster, her footsteps echoing strangely. The echo sounded wrong, like the sound was being absorbed rather than bouncing. After 20 minutes of descending, she stopped. She was breathing hard, exhausted. She'd descended far more than she'd climbed. She should be in the basement by now, below ground level, but the staircase just continued downward. Natalie forced herself to think clearly. She'd try going up again. She'd find a door, a landing, something. She turned and started climbing, up and up. The stairs never changed. Same narrow width, same worn wooden steps, same water-stained plaster walls. No doors, no windows, no access points. Just stairs that turned every 12 or 15 steps, landing after landing, climbing into nothing. Natalie's phone showed 12:34 p.m. She'd been in this staircase for over 40 minutes now. People would be wondering where she was. Her next appointment was at 1:30 p.m. across town. She needed to get out. She tried calling 911, no signal. She tried opening her GPS, no signal. The phone functioned, but all connectivity was dead. Natalie kept climbing. She had to reach an end eventually. Stairs couldn't go on forever, but after another 30 minutes, she'd reached no destination. Just more stairs, more turns, more anonymous landings identical to all the others. She sat down on a step to rest, her legs shaking from exertion. In the silence, she heard them. Footsteps above her, distant but distinct. Someone else climbing. The steps were slow and steady, unhurried. "Hello?" Natalie called up the staircase. "Is someone there?" The footsteps continued, steady, ascending, not answering. Natalie stood and climbed faster, trying to catch up to whoever was above her. Maybe they knew the way out. Maybe they were a maintenance worker or resident who understood this impossible architecture. She climbed for 15 minutes, pushing herself hard. The footsteps stayed the same distance ahead, always audible, never getting closer. As if whoever was climbing was matching her pace exactly, maintaining a constant separation. "Please!" Natalie shouted. "I'm lost! I need help!" The footsteps continued, unhurried and constant. Natalie stopped, frustrated and frightened. She was trapped in an impossible staircase, following footsteps that might not even be real. This didn't make sense. Stairs couldn't exist without ending. Buildings had finite heights. Unless this staircase wasn't part of the building anymore. The thought sent a chill through her. What if the staircase had somehow detached from normal space? What if she'd crossed some threshold and entered somewhere else? Somewhere that looked like stairs but wasn't bound by physical laws? Natalie descended again, determined to find the point where she'd entered. The third-floor landing had to be somewhere. She just needed to find it. She descended carefully, looking for any change, any difference that might indicate she was approaching the building's actual structure. After 45 minutes of descent, she saw something different. A door. Finally, a door. Set into the wall at a landing, old wood with a tarnished brass knob. Natalie almost sobbed with relief. She turned the knob and pulled. The door opened into another staircase, identical to the one she'd been in. Same narrow width, same worn steps, same water-stained walls. Just more stairs ascending and descending into darkness. Natalie slammed the door shut and backed away. This was a nightmare. This couldn't be real. She continued descending, passing more doors now. Every few landings, a door appeared. She tried them all. Each one opened into another staircase. Different configurations sometimes. Some spiraled, some had wider steps, some had railings of different designs, but all fundamentally the same. Stairs going up and down with no destination. Natalie lost track of time. Her phone battery died. She was thirsty and exhausted. Her legs burned from the constant climbing and descending. But she kept moving, driven by the desperate hope that she'd eventually find an exit. She encountered other people, or things that looked like people, figures on the stairs climbing or descending. Natalie would see them ahead or hear them behind her, but whenever she got close, they'd disappear around a turn or pass through a door or simply vanish. She was never able to catch them or speak to them. Once she passed a landing where an elderly man sat on the steps staring at nothing. "Excuse me," Natalie said, "do you know the way out?" The man looked at her with empty eyes. "I've been here 30 years. There is no out, just stairs." Natalie backed away from him and continued climbing. Time became meaningless. She climbed until exhausted, then rested, then climbed again. She lost count of how many landings, how many turns. The staircase was infinite or functionally infinite, and she was trapped in it. Eventually, she heard voices, real voices, not just footsteps, calling her name. Natalie, Natalie Okoye! She followed the voices down, descending as quickly as her exhausted body could manage. The voices grew louder. Natalie, can you hear us? I'm here, she screamed. I'm here! She rounded a turn and saw light. Real light, not the sourceless gray illumination, flashlight beams, and beyond them, the third-floor landing, the actual landing of Riverside Manor. People were there. Mrs. Hirsch, several staff members, 2 police officers. They were shining flashlights up the staircase, calling her name. Natalie stumbled down the last section of stairs and practically fell into Mrs. Hirsch's arms. Thank God, the administrator said. We've been searching for hours. Where were you? The stairs, Natalie gasped. I climbed the stairs past the 3rd floor. They kept going. They wouldn't stop. The police officers exchanged glances. One of them looked up the staircase past the 3rd floor landing. Ma'am, there are no stairs past this landing. This is the top floor. Natalie pulled away and looked. The staircase ended at the 3rd floor landing. Just ended. No continuation upward. The wall was solid above the landing. No, Natalie said. There were stairs. I climbed for hours. You've been missing for 6 hours, Mrs. Hirsch said gently. We found your car still in the parking lot. Your therapy bag is in Mrs. Voss's room where you left it. We searched the entire building. You weren't anywhere. I was in the staircase. The police officers looked concerned. Ma'am, you might be experiencing confusion. Let's get you checked out by paramedics. Natalie refused. She was exhausted and confused, but she wasn't injured. She just wanted to leave. She collected her bag from Mrs. Voss's room. The elderly woman watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing, and drove home. Over the following days, Natalie tried to rationalize what happened. Hallucination, dissociative episode, carbon monoxide exposure, something medical that explained 6 hours of lost time and the memory of climbing impossible stairs. But 2 weeks later, she received a call from Mrs. Hirsch. Mrs. Voss had disappeared. Staff checked her room in the morning and she was gone. Wheelchair left behind. 3rd floor window closed and locked from inside. No way she could have gotten out of the room, much less the building. They found her 3 days later, walking on Route 6, 12 miles from Riverside Manor, confused and disoriented. When asked where she'd been, she said, I heard footsteps climbing past my floor again. I decided to follow them. I found the stairs. I climbed for so long. I met others on the stairs. They said they'd been climbing for years, decades. They said the stairs go up forever. That eventually you reach something at the top, something that explains why the stairs exist. Mrs. Voss was moved to a different facility. Riverside Manor closed 4 months later, citing structural concerns. The building was purchased by a historical preservation society that planned to renovate it. During preliminary inspection, contractors reported finding evidence of additional staircases hidden within the walls. Staircases that went nowhere, that ended abruptly or looped back on themselves. The architectural survey showed the building's internal geometry didn't match its external dimensions. There was more space inside than should be physically possible. The renovation was abandoned. Riverside Manor sits empty now, locked and fenced, but sometimes people report seeing lights moving behind the windows at night. And those who pass the building late at night sometimes hear it. Footsteps, on stairs, climbing upward, always climbing, never stopping, never reaching wherever those stairs lead. Natalie Okoye never returned to Tyler Hill. She transferred her practice to a different county. But sometimes late at night she dreams of stairs, endless stairs turning and climbing into gray infinity. And in those dreams she hears the footsteps ahead of her, always ascending, And she knows that somewhere, in a building that shouldn't contain such space, a staircase continues upward and people climb it still, searching for something at the top. Something that might not exist, or something that exists but should never be found. The stairs know. The ascending stairs of Riverside Manor. They've been climbing since the building was first constructed in 1892, and they'll climb long after the building crumbles. Because some stairs don't exist in buildings at all. They exist in space between spaces, and they climb toward destinations that reason can't reach. Natalie sometimes wonders what's at the top, what Mrs. Voss and those others are climbing toward. She wonders if anyone's ever reached it, and she wonders in her darkest moments if she should have kept climbing, if she should have trusted the ascending stairs to take her wherever they led. But mostly, she's grateful she found the exit, that she heard the voices calling her back, because she knows, with a certainty that haunts her, that if she'd climbed for just a few hours longer, she would have climbed too far, would have passed the point where returning was possible, would have become another set of footsteps in that impossible staircase, ascending forever, chasing something that might be salvation or damnation at the top of stairs that never end.